You posit a microbiota hypothesis. What's the most compelling evidence to suggest that the gut microbiota plays a foundational role in both the development and alleviation of depressive symptoms?
Amongst, again, a lot of other contemporary life slings and arrows, right? Urbanicity, the pace at which we attack our days, bad diets, we don't get outside and walk and get natural sunlight, we're not getting enough sleep. Right? So there are many, many things that are feeding this pro-inflammatory motif that plagues so many of us, and what is partly responsible for not only an acute bad response to outcome to COVID or another infection, but this long haul kind of set of symptoms that we're seeing. And it's not just anxiety, anxiousness, fretfulness, existential, what's it all about, meaning of life, oh my gosh, I'm going to die kind of stuff, which is there, and you got to treat that too. Mm-hmm. It also has the kind of profound, what we used to call sickness symptoms, right? And that would be brain fog, lethargy, no energy, focus, concentration, vim, vigor, and vitality, right? And this would be the lack of joy, okay? Those folks, that's very much endophenotype consistent with inflammation. Now, keep in mind, back to depression for a second. You know, I'm a DSM-5 guy. I have to be because I'm a, board certified psychiatrist here in the United States. If you check 5 of 9 boxes that set of criteria gives you to make the diagnosis of major depression, you can come up with how many different combinations of symptoms. There's a good question. And the answer is 227. 227 different endophenotypes of depression. For example, you can meet criteria for depression, not be able to sleep all the time, not be able to eat all the time, not be able to sit still, not be able to move. So which of those endophenotypes, which of those 227 unique presentations is associated with inflammation, right? And then that's what I look for. And in answer to that question, that type of depression that is associated with inflammation is the old atypical, now being called immunometabolic depression, sleeping all the time, eating all the time, fatigue, lethargy, brain fog, no joy in Mudville, Debbie Downer, Eeyore, slug leaving a trail, comorbid PTSD, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, right? So what happens early sets you up for this, again, exuberant immune reactivity to whatever the stimulus is, in this case, let's say COVID. Now, back to the early part of that question. Well, what makes me think that has anything to do with the gut? Well, interestingly enough, we know that if you give somebody who has depression the microbiome, how do we put this? You give them a fecal material transplant of a healthy person, and you can treat their depression. Which kind of depression? Well, you know which kind, that immunometabolic, atypical, inflammatory depression. Similarly, I can take a normal person and inject them, don't try this at home, okay? Inject them with fecal material transplant of a depressed person and make that individual previously not depressed, now depressed. Kind of interesting. So that was some of the early data. Who thinks of these things? So we've known about this for quite some time, just now starting to be considered for prime time. Now we have a lot of other data sets, right? In certain types of depression, treating inflammation, treating the gut seems to work. I use a lot of probiotics, a lot of fish oil, a lot of D3, a lot of L-methylfolate, right on top of my antidepressants, right on top of my medications in those people in whom I believe they have that intestinal hyperpermeability and they have that neuroinflammation because of that leaky gut, blah, blah, blah. I do those things when I can. And so there are lots of I think, data points that consist this, or rather that support this. If I have somebody that comes to me and they meet criteria for depression and they have an elevated CRP and they have other evidence of inflammation, they're going to get a norepinephrine dominant treatment strategy medication-wise, not a serotonin dominant strategy. And we know that if we support serotonin unilaterally or disproportionately for any length of time, SSRIs, all of your SNRIs, you had a compensatory decrease in dopamine and norepinephrine. So I'm going to make those negative symptoms, those lack of symptoms, those immunometabolic symptoms, right? Lack of joy, lack of motivation, get up and go, vim, vigor, and vitality, clarity of thought, executive function. I'm going to make all that worse, right? So that's where I really use this thought process and this unifying theory, so to speak, to guide my treatment decisions, whether that be medication, psychotherapy, Get a life, people, right? Go get some sleep. Go walk in the sun. Eat a handful of nuts. Whatever those life hacks are.
Mhm.
Have a relationship. Change your evil ways. Brain transplant if you need one. But in addition to that, when I'm going to use medications, I'm going to use in that individual something that's not serotonin dominant, right? Now, that's really kind of out there. But in somebody that has atypical metabolic depression, and I coach my mainstream colleagues all the time, do not use an SSRI or even an SNRI, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, selective serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor, because all of them are serotonin dominant treatment strategies that at best will only treat certain symptoms and will ignore, maybe even make worse, all of these other humanity robbing negative symptoms, we call them the lack of.
Mhm.
Get up and go joy, blah, blah, blah. All right. So that's kind of how I use this thing. Now, another good measure, I think, biologically that has good support, even in my literature, would be salivary cortisol. Is this a high cortisol depression or a low cortisol depression? Huh, that's interesting. No one talks like that. So you get those three symptom-based subtypes among those 227 endophenotypes, right? Way over here to my right, you've got the can't sleep, can't eat, can't sit still, weeping and a wailing, doom, despair, and agony on me, take my Lord to be better off dead, comorbid OCD and panic, high anxiety. You want to take a benzo before you see them. Oh my gosh, right? Now, they're the ones that have high cortisol
Mhm.
differently than this person over here, Debbie Downer, Eeyore, slug leaving a trail, sleeping all the time, eating all the time, fatigue, lethargy, brain fog, okay? No joy in Mudville, PTSD, fibromyalgia. They're the ones that have the low cortisol. Low cortisol equals high inflammation. Simplistically, I'm a simple guy. They're the ones that have the increased gut microbial change, that decreased gut microbial diversity, and thereby the leaky gut. Those are the ones that are going to get my norepinephrine dominant treatment strategy, or at least balance. Okay. And how I do that, well, it's not for this talk probably, but I'm going to do that and then also give some of my best inflammation right sizing treatment strategies. And we've already talked about this fish oil D3, right? A little L-methylfolate. I love my N-acetylcysteine. They're going to get a probiotic, and they're going to get some very direct dietary and lifestyle suggestions.